This is going to be a 1-hour webinar on how to use macro strategic planning to manifest the life, business, and relationships you want. And it's presented by Equinesti Resources, which is a whole-being education, facilitation, and transformation company whose founders have over 25 years' experience in training and mentoring business owners, executives, investors, and top advisors. I'd like to introduce to you now Bruce Raymond Wright, who is the co-founder of Equinesti Resources. He's an author, mentor, teacher, and the inventor of the macro strategic planning process that we're discussing this evening. Welcome, Bruce.
Hello, Taruni. Thank you for the introduction. It's an honor to have some attendees with us here this evening. And I understand we're going to be recording this so that it will be archived and available on our website for anybody who wants to go back and listen to it, or any new visitors to the website who would like to get caught up on any of the past webinars. So I played around a little bit with the title of the event for this evening, and I changed it to Macro Strategic Planning, How to Plan and Manifest the Life, Relationships, Business, and Financial Security You Want. And if we can go to the next slide, I've made some suppositions, and I want to make sure that our audience is clear and that we're in alignment. So on this next slide, supposition number 1 is this: everyone on this webinar wants a whole brain, whole being process to ease, speed, and optimize the results you want, to know how to do it. So the essence of this evening's activity is not just to discuss concept in theory, but to drill down into some of the details as to how to do things, how to make things happen. So as we go through the different slides, we can go ahead to the next one, please. I will make sure that we get at least some of the details. And anybody who listens to the webinar or goes through the PowerPoints and has questions is welcome to send me an email, ask the questions, or schedule a telephone conference call so we can discuss whatever questions or issues that you might have. Supposition number 2, everyone wants to improve some key aspect or aspects, plural, of their life, relationships, business, career, or financial condition. Next slide, please. Supposition number 3 is this: everyone wants to have greater peace of mind, especially during adversity, economic instability, and/or political unrest. I believe that most of our participants today would agree that we are living in times where there is an abundance of adversity. Economic instability is the reality of our time, and we have a very high level of political unrest in our country here in America, but also in many other parts of the world. One of the things that I think is interesting about this particular slide is this observation. I believe that it's very tempting for human beings to take the position that whatever time they are experiencing on this earth is one of the most difficult times. Very rarely do you find somebody say, wow, we're living in a time where it's a utopian existence. And anybody who feels that way throughout history, as long as they have a bigger view than their own backyard, can quickly find a substantial amount of adversity, turmoil, and challenges in the human condition. Things like diseases, or starvation, or scarcity of any type of historical reference that you want to think of, have been with mankind since before the time of recorded history. So one of the real aspects of this human existence is that we're going to experience adversity, we're going to experience economic instability, and there's going to be political unrest. In fact, we live in a state of consistent, constant change, and there is no way that we can escape that any more than we can escape the force of gravity. Next slide, please. So one of the real questions that we all need to consider is this. Is it better to have a well-proven system versus not having a proven system, but working really hard anyway? What I see much of the time is people struggling to get from place A to place B, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in some aspect of their life personally, or some aspect of their career or their business. They're trying to make progress, they're trying to get to someplace better, or they're trying to keep things going smoothly and going well, if that's the condition that they're in. So once we achieve a level of success or a sense of safety, a sense of security, a sense of peace of mind, it's only humans who want to perpetuate that state of well-being. So I made this little footnote that hope alone is rarely, if ever, an effective strategy. I will admit that I have experienced times in my life where it certainly seemed as though hope was the only thing I had to rely on, and I suspect that anybody over the age of 20 or 30 years old has had some experience in their life where they were so stricken by a given circumstance that hope seemed like the one and only option that was available for them to work their way out of it. But I have found that if you think about it in a more conscious and holistic way, strategies, tactics, and tools start to show up in your consciousness, and you begin to be able to find a way out of the predicament that you're in. So hope all by itself really just doesn't work. It's when you take hope and you combine it with some other things. And I would suggest that having a well-proven system that other people have utilized to get from place A to place B on a consistent basis is an excellent place to start. One of my friends is Dr. Mark Woolston, who's a renowned psychiatrist who lives here in Southern California. And we were having a conversation one day about high achievers, and Mark said, well, the thing about high achievers is they always find a way. They might even be a little bit delusional in that they expect to find a way to accomplish their goals, and it seems like they accomplish just about every goal that they set out to conquer. And we started talking about people who don't accomplish a lot in life or who are really struggling in life. And Mark made the comment that there is a challenge when you just don't know how to do something. It's very difficult to muster the courage or the willpower to do something when you just don't know how to get from A to B. And this was one of the very early conversations as we were beginning to develop a relationship. And he said, you know, there's that old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. But I think that a lot of people just don't have the courage and the confidence to proceed without knowing how. And I think that there's a lot of truth in that. I think a lot of people feel stuck where they are because they don't know how to think their way out of their current condition. So if we use our financial situation in the world today or business models as another example, if the business model that you have been using for a long period of time worked and worked incredibly well, I'll give you an example. I have some clients who started with virtually nothing, took a family real estate business, put together a strategic alliance with some landowners, aggregated the land into a joint venture, and over the course of about 7 years, they were able to complete a real estate development. They had an enormous amount of adversity that came up. There was problems with the county and the city and the state, the federal government. There were all kinds of governmental agencies individually that gave them challenges, and as one of the brothers put it, they were all a bunch of extortionists. Everybody had their hand out. Everybody was trying to get their pound of flesh from them. And there were times when it just absolutely felt like it wasn't going to be worth it. The risk was too great. The struggle was too much. And there was this great temptation to quit. But they pushed through that adversity because one of the things they had learned from their father and their uncle was a well-proven system on how to get from A to B. So they didn't have all the capital that they needed, but they did have a well-proven system. And they were able to take this well-proven system and go out into the marketplace and attract partners and financial capital so that they could complete the project. And when they were finished, they had developed over 2,300 homes, a shopping center, and a YMCA, and they amassed hundreds of millions of dollars of net profit. So all of the partners fared extremely well in that endeavor, despite all of the adversity, all of the challenges and problems that they suffered through. And the one thing that they really had going for them was they did have at least elements of a well-proven system. Well, that's really great. Well, then flash forward to the year 2008, and suddenly the banks that were carrying some of the debt on the real estate that they had 1031 exchanged into decided to remargin the loans based on new appraisals. And of course, the real estate was depressed in value, and the banks essentially called in the difference. So if the loan stated that you had to have a debt-to-equity ratio of 60% equity and 40% debt, or 70% equity and 30% debt, whatever it was, in this case they used a very low debt ratio. The banks came in and said, well, the property is now worth 40% less than it used to be, so we're calling in the difference. And the irony of it was they were dealing with a bank. They didn't even know this bank. One bank had been absorbed by another bank, and then that bank was absorbed by another bank. And so this new bank that they had no relationship with was basically trying to, in effect, steal their property. At least that's the way they felt about it. And a bitter legal battle ensued. They lost most of their net worth over the last few years. And so for people who have been struggling, and when you lose, whether it's 10 million or 50 million or 100 million or 50,000, whatever it is, when you lose pretty much all that you had, it's a really difficult place to move forward from, because it's tempting and easy to concentrate on what you lost and what you used to have, rather than putting your focus and your energy into what you're going to do in order to create or manifest new success. And then how are you going to capture that success and utilize it in some really productive way? So if you have a well-proven system, you're going to be in a greater place of advantage than a person that doesn't have a proven system and is just sort of flying by the seat of their pants and making it up, but they're willing to work hard. And, the old expression, it's better to work smart than hard, I think comes into play here. So I'll switch over to the next slide. And what I want to do is begin to get into this whole formula. Now, when I'm looking at the screen, I'm seeing the slide upside down. There it is now. It's correct, except we're on the wrong slide. So this next slide, I want to introduce the universal success formula, and also known as macro strategic planning. It is true that when I created this particular process or system or formula, I was dealing with a condition in the marketplace that I was engrossed in. And this is primarily very successful people who were not happy. And they couldn't understand why it was they weren't happy. They wanted to get happy, and they had enormous amounts of wealth, but they just weren't living their life in a way that was significant enough and fulfilling enough. They had all kinds of challenges with relationships with family members and divorces and just all kinds of problems. And some of them had tried this model. Well, I've got $25 million now. If only I had $50 million, then I'd be happy. And over time, they'd get to $50 million, and they'd sort of wake up one day and they realize, I've got $50 million of net worth, but I'm really not happy. I think I need $100 million. Then I'll be happy. And for some of these people, they really got into hundreds of millions of dollars, and a few of my clients got to where they had over $1 billion with a B of net worth, and they still weren't happy. So I came up with this process so that no matter where I found a person, whatever condition they were in, I would be able to help them get from where they were to someplace better. And to do it in a way where I wasn't telling them what to think or telling them what to do, but really mentoring them through a process so that they could self-discover what was the best place for them to be. Where should they be next? Who should they be next? And what really felt right for them. So it's a combination of thinking about some really challenging issues, but also feeling your way through it. And back in the 70s, when I first got exposed to this idea of how the human brain works, the logic at the time was, or the belief system at the time was, the left hemisphere of the brain is about cognitive, scientific, mathematical, linear reasoning. And some people are left brain dominant, typically actuaries, most scientists, accountants, financial advisors, lawyers would tend to be left brain dominant, at least at work. Now, the right brain dominant people typically would be actors, actresses, artists, creative type people, graphic designers, etc. And that was sort of the logic at the time. Over the years, as neuroscience has improved, we realized the brain is far more complex than what was originally thought back in the 1970s. But it's interesting that even though the left brain, right brain view or perspective on how the brain works is antiquated, even the most advanced neuroscientists have a tendency to relate back to left brain, right brain. So until some better model for explaining it comes along, I'll just continue to use the model that enables people to wrap their mind around it and understand it. So if you have a sense of vision about what you want that is primarily left brain dominant, and the advisors and the support team and the different people in your life are primarily left brain dominant, you're going to get left brain oriented vision, which means it's incomplete, it's half brain vision, and you're going to get half brain solutions. And whatever process or system you come up with is going to be half brain. And really what I wanted to do is to come up with a methodology which would allow anybody who was capable of left brain cognitive reasoning and also sort of the right brain creative thought and emotions and those issues that are typically associated with the right hemisphere of the brain, to be able to really step back from their situation, take a holistic macro view, and use their whole brain. And that was where the phrase macro came from for me, or at least my use of it, was macro being big picture, whole brain vision and capability, and then developing your strategic plan from that macro or whole brain perspective. As time went by, I began to realize that the whole brain capability by itself wasn't quite enough. And that, in fact, for a lot of people, they didn't want to delve into a spiritual view of themselves, a spiritual view of their money, a spiritual view of their business. It was just all about transactions, all about money. They were taking a very transactional or left brain type of an approach to it. But I found the people that made the most progress and got to the highest levels of happiness, the highest levels of personal fulfillment and sense of significance about their lives, they viewed life, business, money, relationships spiritually, not just temporally. So I really started to then move into this whole being concept and really focusing on helping people who were able and willing to move in that kind of a direction. So what's interesting, if you look at the marketplace today, whether we're talking about financial services, or we're talking about the practice of law, the practice of accounting, investment banking, business planning, strategic planning, and even to a very large degree some of the medical sciences and also neurosciences tend to be left brain dominant thinkers that gravitate towards those particular fields. And if those are the people that you're getting your advice from, you're going to get half-brain vision, half-brain advice, and half-brain solutions. And I can easily point to many examples of how a half-brain solution or half-brain outcome is usually inferior to a whole-brain outcome. Then we can go a step further to the whole being, and for those people who I affectionately refer to as those brave souls who are willing to go above and beyond whole brain thinking and move into this whole being way of thinking about themselves and their future and the world in which they live. These people tend to achieve or align with the greatest levels of personal satisfaction and sense of fulfillment, sense of well-being. And so that's why you see half brain versus whole brain versus whole being on this particular slide. But it affects everything, but it starts at vision. And that is step number one in the macro strategic planning formula or the universal success formula. So let's switch to the next slide, please. Now, anybody who knows me well will tell you I'm a bit of a nerd, and I like to use numbers to measure things. I believe that when you can measure something, you can understand it better, and you have greater clarity around it. So here I've used the example of commitment, which is the second step in the macro strategic planning or universal success formula. And what you see here is a continuum with 0 in the middle. And to the left of the 0, you have integers or negative numbers, minus 1 through minus 5. And then to the right of the 0, you have plus 1 to plus 5. So we can measure just about anything this way, including commitment. And you say, well, how can you measure commitment with a negative number? And anybody who asks me that, I like to ask them if they have either raised a child or have ever been a child, which I think covers everybody. And if you think about children, I think you would agree that there are times when a child will make a commitment to you that they really are not going to keep. So they'll tell you, for example, that they're going to clean their room on Saturday morning, and you say to them, well, look, Billy's birthday party is at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and you are not going to Billy's birthday party unless your room is clean. So you should get in there right now. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. Stop watching cartoons and go clean your room. And, of course, 11 o'clock rolls around, and they probably still haven't cleaned their room. So you remind them, if you want to go to Billy's birthday party, you got to go clean your room. So eventually the kid gets up, goes into the room, starts cleaning. Well, what happens is their commitment to playing and their commitment to enjoying life and experiencing immediate pleasure is greater right now than the fear of not being allowed to go to Billy's birthday party. So they find that they go to put a toy away in the closet, and they see a toy in the closet. It's already in the closet in the corner. They haven't played with it in 8 months. It captures their imagination. They pull it out of the closet, and they actually begin to make a bigger mess in their room because now they're playing with toys that they've just newly rediscovered in their closet. And I think all of us have had that experience either as a child ourselves or as parents. And so you can, in fact, say that the child told you that they had a positive number on commitment. They didn't say it that way, but you could measure it that way. They seem to be a plus 5 in that they want to go to Billy's birthday party. They're a plus 5 on that. But when it comes to cleaning the room, they'll tell you that they're committed to cleaning up the room, but the truth of it is they're really at a plus 4, plus 5 on seeking immediate pleasure, and therefore they're really a minus 2 or a minus 3 when it comes to their commitment about cleaning the room. And for those people who are experiencing this webinar who are in leadership or management positions, It's very, very important, whether you're a parent or whether you're a manager or an owner of a company, it's very, very important to not allow yourself to believe in a false commitment statement. So one of the positions that I take with all of my clients is I can only help you get into alignment with and achieve a vision or a state of being wherein you are at least a +4 on this commitment continuum. If you're not at least the +4, you're wasting your time, your money, and my time and my energy to try to help you get someplace else. So if you really truly want to get to some new and different and better place, you got to be at least a +4. I have a friend who recently experienced a difficult situation in his career. He was laid off from a Fortune 500 company where he was a senior executive. And we were having lunch, and I said to him, like I had many times in the past, Steve, you really ought to write a book. And he surprised me in that this time he said, yeah, I think you're right. Maybe I should write a book. And he became so committed to the idea of writing a book over the next week or so that he actually, within 3 weeks, had written the first draft of his book. So his commitment level was clearly at a +4 or +5, and so he followed through, and he pushed through all the barriers, and he did the work of writing a book in spite of the fact that there were 8,000 other things that could have captured his imagination and distracted him at any given time, like the little kid who's putting one toy away in the closet, sees another toy back in the corner that he hasn't played with, pulls it out and plays with it. And this is what happens with a lot of people. Even though we're supposedly adults, we are tempted to continue to behave like children probably for the rest of our lives. And so that's my thinking about commitment and understanding how the commitment process really works. So let's go to the next step here, which is goals. Goals are specifically created in order to lead you to the fulfillment of your vision. So remember, we're starting with vision, then we go to commitment, then we go to goals. So bullet point number 1 must lead to fulfillment of vision. A goal that doesn't directly lead you to the fulfillment of your vision is a waste of time and energy most of the time. Bullet point number 2 must be in tangible, must be in tangible written form so they are clear, concise, and absolutely understood by each person associated with the completion of the goal. If you don't have it in tangible written form, people who told you that they were committed earlier to helping you achieve a goal, later on, when the timeline isn't met, will probably say something like this. Oh, you wanted me to do that by Tuesday? Well, I didn't know you wanted me to do that by Tuesday. I wasn't clear about that. I wasn't even sure how to do it. Are you sure you wanted me to do it? Because I don't really remember if you told me to do it or you told Sally to do it. So when a goal is in written form and it's clearly articulated and clearly understood by the members of the team or the individuals who are responsible for helping you achieve the goal, you increase accountability. And the simple reality about the world we live in is that most people would rather live in a state of ambiguity than in a state of clarity. This is why when you ask so many people about their vision, what would your vision be if you were to sit down and think about the greatest life or the greatest business that you would dare to imagine, what would that look like? How would it feel? What would you do? What would your ideal life and perfect calendar really look like? Let's pull out a calendar and let's fill it up with this vision for what your ideal life and perfect calendar would be. Most people are overwhelmed at the initial thought of a project like that because they're living in a state of ambiguity about who they are and where they want to go next and who they want to be next. So as long as we allow ambiguity to prevail, then we have a lack of clarity and we have a lack of accountability. So if you're really serious about achieving your vision, you definitely want to deal with making sure that yourself, on your own terms, that you're really in a high enough level of commitment and you have enough passion and sense of purpose to push through whatever adversity or barrier you need to get there. Now, this accountability issue is absolutely critical as well, because you can hold yourself and others accountable. Bullet point number 3, must be clearly measurable based upon tangible results, i.e. time, weight, size, capacity, output, inflow, GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting principles, EBITDA. So I'm talking about real forms of actual measurement, not some touchy-feely, namby-pamby, politically correct ideal about, well, goals are really not important, and there's really no such thing as the truth, and it's not whether you win or lose. It's just that you try. Those kinds of ideas are not going to put you into alignment with who and what you want to be if you see yourself as becoming a more powerful and majestic being. So clearly measurable, based upon tangible results, absolutely critical. And again, we're back to clarity about what is expected, when is it expected, who's responsible for what. Now, this is where we get into the how to do things, which is strategies. It's our next slide. When we start thinking strategically, it's important to know what a strategy is. And a strategy is a plan of action or multiple actions designed to complete a goal which fulfills the vision. If my vision is that I really, really, really want to optimize the effectiveness of the wealth that I've accumulated, I probably want to keep my taxes at a minimum. So my vision is to live a powerful and majestic life where my wealth sustains my lifestyle, funds my philanthropic interest, and gives me the freedom that I need so that I can spend my time, talents, and resources doing whatever it is that brings me joy and fulfillment, as opposed to working to produce an income. So if that's my definition of my vision, and then I could easily say that one of my strategies is going to be to reduce capital gains taxes, which is the last bullet point here. And if I keep my taxes at a minimum, I have more money available to fund my own philanthropic interests. So I cut out the middleman, the government, and now I have more of my money that I can control and direct specifically to the causes around which I have the greatest passion, as opposed to the goals and desires of a politician who wants to stay in office and is going to redistribute my money based on his or her need to stay in power. And I don't want to get into some big political discussion, but a lot of my clients really feel that they've worked to produce the wealth and they want to be the stewards of that wealth, and they believe that they are the best stewards of their own accomplishments, and that they don't believe in turning that stewardship over to other people and abdicating their own personal sense of responsibility and direction. So another thing about a strategy is bullet point number 2. It must be adaptable based upon ongoing developing relevant factors. So again, if we're talking about a strategy of reducing our capital gains taxes, if the capital gains tax laws change, then we may need to change our strategy. Or we may keep the strategy the same, but we just alter the tactics that we're going to use at any given time. We may alter the tools that we use at any given time, but the inherent vision still remains the same, but the strategies are adaptable, the tactics are adaptable, the tools are absolutely fluid and adaptable, and when we start to view the world this way, we get into a state where we have a lot less stress in our lives because we're not holding on to things that ought not to be permanent. So the strategies ought not to be permanent, and neither should the tactics or the tools be permanent. Our vision can last a very long time or a short time, but it can literally be so powerful that it becomes the vision for the rest of our lives, whether that's for another year that we live or whether it's for another 50 years that we live. I'd even take this a step further. Our vision could be for a 100-year plan, or our vision could be for a 1,000-year plan, something which transcends our own lifetime. So if we start thinking in transcendent terms, then we believe that we can create a vision for what we want to accomplish with our life energy, with the financial energy that we accumulate. How do we utilize that energy over the next 1,000 years in ways that improve the world in some way that we're passionate about? So that kind of a vision can be ongoing or permanent, whereas strategies, tactics, and tools, just like tax laws or economic conditions, are transient. So you cannot build a 100-year plan around anything that's transient. I remember doing a speech at least 20 years ago, and I was talking about and introducing this concept of the 100-year plan, and there was a lawyer in the audience of some renown, and he said to me, well, Mr. Wright, it's kind of ridiculous to be thinking about a 100-year plan. The tax laws change, the legal code changes, the economic conditions shift. All of these things are in a state of flux. Therefore, it's ridiculous to think that you can create a 100-year plan. And I said, well, I've already created several 100-year plans. And with some of my clients, we've created 500-year plans and 1,000-year plans. And it's one of the areas that a lot of people seek me out for, is to create this bigger, longer-term vision, something which transcends themselves and enables them to move into a condition of greater self-transcendence. He said, I don't even know what you're talking about. I said, well, let me put it to you this way. I agree with everything that you said up to a point. So all of these things that you said are in a state of constant flux. I agree with you, they are. But you don't build a 100-year plan or 500-year plan or any long-term plan around something which is transient. You can only build long-term plans around things which are long-lasting, enduring, or perhaps even meeting your concept of eternal. So again, we're sort of back to the stewardship idea. Is your stewardship just about what you're going to do over the next 3 years or the next 6 months, or is your sense of stewardship about some time frame and some sense of purpose that is bigger than, longer than your own lifetime? So I want to go back to this example here of reducing capital gains taxes and move to the next slide, please. And when we do that, we're going to get into tactics. So tactics are detailed actions which fulfill a strategy, which completes a goal, which puts one in alignment with or enables one to attain their vision. So you kind of have to break that sentence down just a little bit. Detailed actions which fulfill a strategy, which completes a goal, which puts one in alignment with or attainment of vision. So this is I think, a highly flexible scenario. The tactics can shift rapidly based upon any number of things which change in the world around us. So let's look at the example. The strategy was to reduce capital gains taxes, and your tactics are, and there's a lot more potential tactics to this, but I just listed a few of them. If we are involved in a capital gains transaction that is real estate, well, we could do a 1031 exchange. If we're facing a potential capital gains tax on the liquidation of an insurance policy or an annuity, we could do a 1035 exchange. If we're involved in selling our business for stock in another company, then we could use a 1036 exchange. So these would be examples of details or how to go about doing something in any of those three or four different scenarios. Another option that works universally there is to utilize a charitable remainder unit trust. And the simplest methodology for avoiding capital gains tax is death. If you die, you get a stepped-up basis, and there's no capital gains tax. But I rarely recommend death to people as a strategy for, or a tactic for avoiding any kind of tax. So I listed a few of them because I wanted to give you an idea that it could be any number of those things or some combination of those things that could work. And the next thing we get to is tools. If we move to the next slide, please, we're going to see tools. Tangible items deployed to execute tactics. As an example, right now, all of us are using a computer, which is a tool, or we're using a telephone, which is a tool, so that we can participate in this learning experience. They're tools. I don't care whether you're using a MacBook Pro or a Air Mac or a Hewlett-Packard or a Dell or a laptop or a desktop. I don't care. And I don't know that you care either. But I know some people really, really do, and it has to be a Macintosh something or other, or they're going to be upset and frustrated if they have to use anything other than a Mac. But to me, the tools are essentially irrelevant. It doesn't really make any difference. And tools, by and large, tend to be commodities. We can get them anywhere. Computers are a classic example. We can get a computer anywhere. They're commodities. And you start looking at specific details of what you want, and you're going to match that up with where you can get the features that you want at the best price with good service. Maybe those are your criteria for picking a computer. When it comes to making investments, where a lot of people make a mistake is they don't understand that ultimately their business is a tool to create income which gets distributed to them to live off of, and wealth in the form of the value of the business. So as your life progresses, one particular type of a tool might not suit your highest and best purposes any longer. So you exchange or sell that tool, and you take the proceeds from the sale of that tool and you utilize it to acquire other tools that do serve your highest and best purpose moving forward. So when you become really emotionally attached to a tool, you are significantly reducing your flexibility to move forward and embrace new tools and tools that are better suited to your purpose moving forward. And you see this all the time. People will say, well, you know, I inherited this stock from my grandfather, and he said never, ever, ever sell the stock. No matter what, don't sell the stock because it's going to do really great. Well, and so they'll hold on to the stock and live a relatively impoverished life while they've got millions of dollars worth of a stock that doesn't really spin off much of income in the form of dividends. When they could, in fact, liquidate the stock, they could, in fact, completely avoid all capital gains tax if they were so inclined to do it, and create a wealth, a pool of wealth that is comprised of a diversified collection of assets which do serve their highest and best purposes and produce the income necessary so that they can live a free and abundant life. Or they can follow the advice of a dead guy who passed away 35 years ago and has no clue whatsoever what any market condition might be today or what the economic condition is for the heirs to whom he gave the stock. So certain types of advice make sense coming from dead guys, timeless, ageless wisdom, for example. However, advice attached to a particular tool is usually ridiculous, such as telling your grandson, I'm going to leave you this horse and this buggy in my will, and I want you to take good care of my horse and the buggy and never, ever, ever, ever sell them because they're going to be your transportation for the rest of your life. Well, that sounded like really great advice in 1775, except you'd have to admit the horse isn't going to live forever, so at some point you want to trade the horse in. And better buggies are going to come along. And then, of course, if you're talking about that same piece of advice in the late 1800s, the Stanley steamer comes along. and then eventually automobiles come along, and pretty soon nobody's riding around in buggies pulled by horses. Tools should be looked at. I think that's the healthy way to view them. They're tools, they're temporary, and there's no logical reason to form an emotional attachment to a tool such as this particular laptop computer and holding on to it because we just don't want to upgrade because we're emotionally attached to this particular laptop because it's been with us through thick and thin, those kinds of things. They are not in your highest and best interest. So if we take tools to finish this idea here of reducing the capital gains taxes, then the example of a tool will be the legal documents effectively crafted to satisfy all requirements associated with 1031, 1035, and 1036 exchanges, or the legal document necessary to create a charitable trust and to assure that the assets were properly transferred to the trust prior to the sale. So those are examples of very specific things. Those are the how to do them, and but I hope that you're seeing the trend here is that this is a balance of big picture, whole brain, whole being thinking matched up with left brain details as to strategies, tactics, and tools. So I want to move to the next slide, please. And I want to talk about timing for just a moment. I have a friend named Howard White, and he heard a speech that I did a number of years ago, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, Bruce, whenever you're explaining the concept of timing, please be sure and tell your audience this. Timing is everything except when it isn't. And we need to switch to the next slide, please. And that's by Howard White. Timing is everything except when it isn't. So here's a couple of my little notes on timing. Bullet point number 2, you can have some influence on the timing of accomplishments or results, but you cannot control timing entirely. And the third bullet point here, your sense of timing is very likely to be uncomfortable for others and a point of anxiety for you. And then I would add, unless you choose for it not to be. Now, you can't choose for other people as to whether your sense of timing is going to be uncomfortable for them or not. That's a decision that they have to make. But you virtually always get to decide whether you're going to be frustrated and anxious over how long or how difficult it is to accomplish something. You get to control your emotions around that. I have this next slide here, which breaks down sort of the left brain thinking and the points of contact that are left brain oriented. You got switch to the next slide, please. Left brain would be strategies, tactics, tools, and timing. The right brain, on the other hand, would be the vision, the commitment, the goals, and timing. So for some reason, my computer isn't showing the slide that I want to be on. Hopefully we'll get that corrected momentarily. The numerical order for this formula is point number 1 is vision. Point number 2 is commitment. Point number 3 is goals. Number 4 is timing, and timing applies to everything above it and everything below it, or everything that is left brain and everything that is right brain. And timing sometimes is everything except when it isn't. So we're going to move down to another slide. This one says other critical considerations. The other critical considerations that we need to be cognizant of and pay careful attention to is the clarity of our vision and our sense of purpose. And if we have enough clarity and our vision is clear enough and our sense of purpose is strong enough that we can fully commit to it, item number 2 becomes 100% easier. And point number 2 is consistent courage. I have seen countless people give up right before they were about to succeed because they just couldn't sustain enough courage to push through the remaining barriers, the last little bit of adversity. And sometimes that adversity can be really, really difficult. Sometimes, in order to achieve your highest sense of purpose, you have to let go of a company that you built, or you may have to let go of relationships with people that you've had for a very long time. There's a lot of people in this world who can become very, very upset with you when you decide to move into and really embrace your highest and best sense of self, because the changes that you go through in that transformational process will very likely have an effect on other people around you. And if they are not connected to this kind of thinking about moving to a higher and better place, a higher and better state of being personally, they can do all kinds of things to try to sabotage your progress and to hold you back because they don't want the changes that you're about to implement to happen, because they see it as having an adverse effect on them. And if you don't have any awareness about that, you can end up being severely disabled in your progress and your ability to get things done, because people will sabotage your efforts because they're trying to hold on to what is the current situation because they're comfortable in that current situation and they're uneasy and uncomfortable about the new thing that you want to do or the new you. Point number 3, personnel. These people need to be dedicated and capable. The people in your life that are on your team need to be dedicated and capable. And one of the questions I remind all of my clients to consider consistently is this. Were these the right people to get you from where you used to be to where you are today? And usually the client will say, well, yeah, most of them turned out to be really good. That's why I've had them around for a while. The next question's a lot harder. Are these the right people to get you from where you are now to where you want to be next? And that's really a challenge because a lot of times our sense of loyalty inhibits us from letting go of the people that are no longer the right fit for us in order to make room for the relationships with the people that we do need moving forward to get from where we are to where we want to go. The next thing, point number 4, is the budget. Is it sufficient enough so that we can execute our plan and achieve our goals? Now, we can make a strong argument for even if your budget currently is insufficient, you just have to outthink it. I remember giving a presentation years ago, and I said one of the great challenges that people tend to have is this. They view everything that they want to do in the future based upon the actual amount of money that is in their wallet today. People who look at the world that way are not going to be super high achievers because they're doing everything from the limited perspective of how big is their financial universe today. You have to learn how to transcend that kind of thinking and move into this other frame of consciousness, which is that all of the people and all of the resources that I need in order to achieve my greatest vision already exist, and at the right time they will become available to me. When you believe that and you move forward in that way of thinking, it's amazing how often all of the right people and all of the resources show up when they need to show up so that you can get where you want to go. The last bullet point here is point number 5, faith in yourself and in your team. When you're really sure that you have done the necessary due diligence and you have the right people on your team and you have the right plan in place, you got to have faith in yourself, faith in your plan, and faith in your team. So I want to move to the next slide, please. Manifestation of what we want flows as follows. A, things we can personally control or greatly influence, i.e., temporal earthly, tangible things are directly affected by how well we apply the recipe or the formula that I've shared with you tonight. So we have an enormous amount of influence or control over these temporal kinds of things. The next point is V. Things we cannot personally control, i.e., the hearts and minds of others, time, and the forces of nature are directly impacted by our ability or capacity to align ourselves spiritually and temporally with what we want. I think I could probably do a half a day just on the subject of manifestation. Maybe I could do a whole book on it. But I really believe that there are just some things where you've got to transcend the temporal and put yourself in alignment on a spiritual level in order to manifest what you want, in order to get where you want to go. You can't get certain places with only a temporal view of things. Equinacy resources, next slide. Here are some of the transformational events and tools that we have available for everybody who is interested in learning more about this type of thinking, behavior, and process that gets results. We have webinars, retreats, training, books, articles, videos, audios, personal consulting, mentoring. We have an amazing faculty of extremely competent, well-seasoned people who are really, really great at getting tangible, measurable results. So I invite you to go check that out on the website. We have some upcoming events. There's a big conference in Las Vegas for the AM and AA Winter Conference. I just did a webinar, a rehearsal today with Mike Knoll, the founder of that organization, and that webinar is happening tomorrow. I would strongly encourage you to experience that and invite your advisors to experience it as well. And then we're going to do a macro strategic planning one-day event, primarily for business owners, executives of companies, investors, and advisors, and it's going to be held in Marina Del Rey on February 17th. Moving to the next slide with some more upcoming events. Business Innovation 2012, Growing Your Business in Turbulent Times. This is going to happen March 15th, 2012 in Los Angeles. An entire day with a great faculty on how to outthink and outmaneuver the turbulent times that we live in today and take an innovative approach to growing your business and transcending the kinds of difficulties that are holding a lot of people back right now. Then we have a macro strategic planning certification course. Phase 1 is June 20th and 21st. Phase 2 is September 17th through 19th. And my last slide here is this announcement. You are invited to connect with us. We have our website, Twitter, email, and phone numbers. And we really encourage you to connect with us, become a member of our website, email us any questions you have, and tell other people about what we're doing and to give them an opportunity to self-determine whether a whole being perspective is a good fit for them and if they're really ready to move into that kind of consciousness and a way of executing details in order to get results. Thank you all for your time today. Taruni, I'm going to turn the time back over to you and say thank you for administering the webinar tonight. Is Taruni there?
Thank you, Bruce.